A warm hello to all. I am Jan Schwartz, and I'm most honored to join my distinguished international colleagues at the Global Scientific Guild's fourth global webinar on forensic science. I would like to begin today by sharing some pertinent history of forensic fraud research and my work as a forensic behavioral scientist. I will then focus on the details of my 5-year project that I've called Anywhere Town, Everywhere County, USA, after which I will discuss the challenges as well as the efforts that work to enhance the project. In 1991, I experienced a most unusual event. I received a visit from a Fortune 500 company's chairman of the board, his 2 sons, and their mafioso. I watched as they walked into the building where I was working, and they actively sought to find me. They immediately began to interrogate me for 25 minutes, mind you. What are you doing in our community? What family are you representing? This moment clearly fueled my interest, and I fervently began to learn all that I could. Before long, I was providing information to 2 federal agencies as well as other private entities, and multi-state investigations ensued. Several other cases followed. In 2000, as you can see, forensic fraud research became incorporated. And while I am the only face affiliated with the firm, numerous skilled professionals, state, local, and federal employees also assist on various cases. In 2003, we became affiliated with the National White Collar Crime Center. And in 2005, I received strong support from my work from the US Department of Justice. Throughout these past 30 years of working with this population, I have encountered many opportunities to conduct 650 plus semi-structured interviews with victims, whistleblowers, alleged offenders, alleged offenders' spouses and family members, witnesses, bystanders, and in the end, I was able to come up with 17 behavioral characteristics and personality traits. They don't perceive of themselves as criminals. And as one alleged offender's wife said to me, Jan, they're not criminals. They just want to have their own way. They're very proud of their ability to lie, to con, and to manipulate. It's imperative that I mention that they want to destroy good. They have a malicious envy toward what is good, and they're deeply envious of those who possess qualities they cannot effectively imitate or emulate. And this differentiates them from the mafia, who do honor certain principles. I also found it interesting that once they have begun to excel at their game, most are incapable of ending the game despite the red flags. Even if they realize they may not succeed with their corrupt behavior, they still persist with it. They control by fear, bribes, or influence, all the while being fearful of being exposed and receiving social disapproval. Understanding and anticipating Burston's manipulative cycle is key for those of us who work with this population. And as you can see by the chart, it's stage 2 that we need to be watching for. And at that moment, when we know they are about to deceive and to put their plan into action, their game into place, it's imperative to perform some sort of an intervention to prevent them from achieving a successful outcome, and then to have to subsequently witness their delight. What do we mean by the terms organized crime? This working definition was provided to me in 1995 by investigator John Clark during a meeting that I had at the HIDA, Money Laundering Division of the FBI in Manhattan. At the time, I had reached out to the Manhattan DA's office. I was hoping for some supervision as they were my heroes. And the next day I found myself arriving at a specific and a different location. This was a most extraordinary moment of training for me. The unit chief welcomed me at the door and shouted, "Hey everybody, the doctor from Ohio is here." He sorted through my documentation and said, "I'm bringing you coffee." Humor is common when working with federal agents. I was then brought into the grand jury hearing room where I was shown the charts of the families. This is an interesting and an important quote. When the largest employers of the county need essential parts that are made by smaller local companies who are indebted for the work, we have an economic feeding chain. The same is also true if there are 53 private foundations that fund 2,000 nonprofits. You see, the imbalance of power keeps the community codependent and enmeshed. But what if there is also a dominant individual, a marionette of sorts, who is monitoring the county through his operatives, manipulating events through his operatives, and controlling what does and does not happen within Anywhere Town, Everywhere County, USA? This puts the matter into a completely different category. Welcome to Project Anywhere Town, Everywhere County, USA. My entrance into the community was bold and perhaps unnerving. I volunteered to lead a sanitary sewer initiative which had failed 7 times previously. I hoped that the project would grant me access to the files, which only happened, I might add, after Everywhere County's prosecutor stepped in to remind Anywhere Town of the Freedom of Information Act. I sent a mailing out to the residents that established the tone of my work, and I was perceived as sincere. Full-time efforts ensued, and I reviewed every document and file. I accessed copies of checks, crucial information. In the compilation of my report, I alleged 22 acts of bold and entitled corruption. I set up meetings with specific individuals to answer pertinent questions, and it was there that I learned that Anywhere Town's police chief had shredded an entire year of documents. Thank goodness Chief so-and-so had just shredded that year, said Anywhere Town's treasurer. The documentation for the 22 acts of alleged corruption filled an entire boardroom table. After I presented to the Everywhere County's prosecutor's office, I received shocking news. I was told no one in the state will take this case. I can't even trust the sheriff. I was devastated in hearing this. I just couldn't accept the fact that this was the end of the story. So while I continued to reach out to national authorities, it was essential for me to change the goal in order to proceed with the project. I quickly adapted to the change and took on the new role of being also a facilitator, and I focused on creating a community. The amount of effort needed to reach out to achieve the 70% signature requirement for the sanitary sewer initiative was tremendous. I was tenacious at every level. I called, wrote, and met with the residents. I developed a relationship with the Everywhere County sanitary engineer and his department. I cultivated a relationship with an Everywhere County commissioner. I hired an attorney who accompanied me to a meeting, and I provided updates to Anywhere Town's council. I also encouraged and empowered others to run for office. Wherever possible, I tried to find facts and information that would benefit Anywhere Town. In every way, my goal was I had to convey I was working on behalf of everyone. I wasn't working or seeking personal gain, but collective gain. People grew accustomed to my style. My interest, passion for the good, and consistency planted seeds of trust. As we approached the deadline for the sewer project, we were 3 votes short of the 70% requirement. I privately coached myself saying, watch for the miracle. The village solicitor and I met with the Everywhere County Sanitary Sewer Department the day before the deadline. And after several hours of phone calls and emails, remarkably, 2 individuals stepped forward and an additional person called me personally to tell me he had changed his mind. I was living a miracle. The successful outcome greatly impacted the residents, and it greatly impacted me. There was every reason to keep going. Volunteering to serve on Anywhere Town's Charter Revision Commission enabled me to address the mayor, council president, and key residents on my findings and my concerns. At the first meeting, I shared the discovery of a contract between the water department and 2 former elected officials that directed profits to them rather than to reinvest in new infrastructure for Anywhere Town. Those attending watched me, but their faces didn't change. I also mentioned that in reading through the files, I discovered 22 acts of corruption and that this was a critical moment to find ways to create a culture of integrity wherein all residents could thrive. Their faces still didn't change. I wonder, were they all in on it, or were they too frightened to show a reaction? I pressed on. I mentioned the need for council to abide by a code of ethics and that creating an Anywhere Town website would increase transparency, which pairs well with a code of ethics. Those present listened politely. The village solicitor commented that, Jan, a code of ethics doesn't belong in Anywhere Town's updated charter, to which I responded, well, stating that Anywhere Town's council members are required to sign a code of ethics might be important to include. At the second meeting, I distributed guidelines for creating an Anywhere Town code of ethics. Interest had increased, and those attending looked through the document. I made a second appeal for the creation of an Anywhere Town website. I spoke of how I created my websites and that I work with a kind and fair website developer. Interest increased. The mayor and others began to ask questions. Who would do this? Who would own it? It was decided that the Owners Association would own it. It was also decided that I would be the facilitator. Specific requirements were listed to create an informational website rather than a social media website, and everyone attending unanimously approved the project. They would trust me to create the website, and I assured them that I would contact them with problems when they arose for those matters that required a consensus. I kept going. I presented a code of ethics at the next Anywhere Town Council meeting. Respect was building. My 5-minute presentation encouraged council members to study it and to imagine signing it. I ended with 5 words, will you lead the way? Those present seemed to be comforted by my follow through, and I quietly absorbed the moral change. It was a beautiful moment. However, determining the website domain name drew out a major conflict. The Owners Association president had purchased a domain boldly announced that this was going to be his retirement and that he follows the money. When pressed, he had no difficulty in refusing to turn over the domain name ownership. Huge red flags. Only one Anywhere Town Council member chose not to support my position that we needed to transfer the created website to a new domain name that I had already secured. Retaliation came swiftly. First, it was spyware. For 10 days, my phone calls were forwarded to someone living in an adjacent state who was a convicted sexual predator and a self-described white supremacist. The next morning, in watching a TV show, I noticed that the ticker tape on the bottom, there was a statement that Apple was mandating a security update for iPhone 12 due to its vulnerability on spyware issues. Shortly thereafter, I received confirmation from authorities that my iPhone was going to receive a security update. I personally needed to hire special technicians to remove the spyware from both my desktop and my laptop. Who was marionetting the retaliation? Next, the website presentation that I was to make was removed from the Anywhere Town's annual business meeting and dinner. Then the OA president and 3 followers began to challenge. They minimized, they obstructed and projected enmity and fueled misinformation to cast doubt on my work. Bylaws were manipulated to put me in a chokehold. The decision of a few to deceive the community and to destroy my collaborative communications and connections was clearly apparent. It was a moment for me to intervene according to the manipulative cycle. And so I quickly wrote a letter of resignation, and that halted the assault. Enmity wasn't good for Anywhere Town, and what had become fun for 4 individuals benefited 3. These were not my rules of power. There are times when silence is needed to sort things through and to gather one's thoughts. This was one of those times. I was experiencing deep grief, yet relief, and also gratitude for my own well-being and for the strong supporters of my work. I knew I needed to confront the manipulators with strength, honesty, and a lasting statement that reflected the intention of my work and my heart. I wasn't abandoning them or the cause. I assembled the facts and put together a timeline of events to share with Anywhere Town's Council and Owners Association. I requested the opportunity for a public speaks presentation. But because of COVID-19 concerns, the meeting was changed to audio only, and that meant that the documentation that I wanted to provide would not be able to be viewed. Therefore, I emailed my public speaks message with accompanying documentation to Anywhere Town's Council, the Owners Association trustees, and to many of my supporters. Support from the residents remained constant. But by then, I had already become aware that new plans for the website were being hastily made. Concerns about what would happen to the informational website continued as a letter was distributed to the residents announcing that 2 new individuals were in charge of the website. Sensing another deception, I quickly intervened. I wrote an article for the Anywhere Town newsletter that will be mailed. This case is in process. Will be mailed next month to all residents of Anywhere Town, announcing the launch of the website. The article that I wrote celebrates the collaborative efforts and emphasized that in order to protect the integrity of anywheretown.org, the integrity of the project, The website is neither to be used to disseminate misinformation or hate, nor is it to be used for personal profit or political gain, nor against any race, religion, creed, or gender, nor as a tool to fuel division within the town. Time will tell what will happen to anywheretown.org. Each of the issues listed here are challenging to manage or to overcome. But what is key for those of us who work in this population, or for those of you who might want to do such a project, learn as much as you can about narcissistic behavior, about narcissism, about the narcissistic personality disorder. To be effective, to be front line, and to work to transform corruption, one needs to be majorly attached to the group of people and to the concept, but it's vital to also be capable of detaching when it becomes necessary. There was a moment when one lady who had been observing my calm and when all of these things were happening, when she said to me, Jan, do you understand that what just happened is because they don't like you? And she waited for my comment, my response. And I looked at her and carefully said, oh, I know that. But what they don't know is that I'm wondering what happened to them in their lives that they would want to treat someone this way. Engaging by the look on the faces of those around, it seemed that by describing things in those terms may have impacted them. What enhances progress? Well, without belief, nothing is going to happen. If we want a culture of integrity, if we want to live in towns that are ethical, somewhat, or humanly as ethical as possible, we must model the change and show that we can endure the struggle to get there. I also want to emphasize that just as many were transformed in this project, so was I. Many of us in the world may be yearning for a feeling we haven't had in a long time, or maybe there are some who've never had this feeling, a feeling of togetherness. Well, imagine if we were to rebuild and transform our communities. Imagine what that would do for our states. And imagine if we were to work to rebuild our states and transform our states. Imagine what that would do for our countries. And then imagine country by country, nation by nation, when problems come up. Imagine how we could face each other and the good we could do for each other. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share my work.